Hello, beautiful beings of light, and welcome to this Galactic Energy Report, Part 2 for my deep seekers and those that really want to dive in deep into the collective energies that we are experiencing at this point in time with the February Gateway energy, which my team in spirit is calling the Rainbow Bridge Gateway, in which we are now experiencing an outpouring of the violet flame of transmutation. In part 1 of the series, we discussed the liminal space and the fact that if we liken the collective to the hero's journey, this is the phase directly after the hero is called onto their path, onto their adventure, only to then refuse the call. And we can see that as the liminal space, the in-between place. It is moving from one bardo or illusion or reality into another. And most of January, I would say all of January, moving into February, this was the state of the collective consciousness. It was a collective pause or breath holding, not quite knowing what's going to happen next. It was very almost like a limbo is the best way that I can describe the energies, or feeling as if we were in a state of limbo. And essentially what was going on with that is the closing of one energy gateway and the beginning of the next. So as it relates to the liminal space, it's moving into a period of transition. It's the hallway, the doorway, the threshold, the in-between spaces. It's the moving from the collective third dimensional grid to the collective fourth dimensional grid in our material realm, not just in the etheric realm. And so this felt quite unsettling and, kind of this feeling of not really knowing where we're going next, when in essence, with all of the retrograding energies that we were experiencing, it was really a recalibration, and that's going to continue on into the month of February. So if I back up now to when I last left you, we came into the awareness that this year was not only the beginning of the hero's journey, where the fourth dimensional grid would begin to take shape into the material world, but it was also a year of balance, balancing that vertical line of the etheric with the horizontal axis of the material. We began our first tender steps into this balancing act during the last energy gateway, which took place on 12/22 of 21. This was the beginning of the inversion matrix, the lack matrix, however you want to look at that, coming into balance from divergent timelines. It was clearing of perceived karma and quantum entanglement. It was another 0 point in this brand new spiral that is taking shape in time-space. As collective consciousness, the remaining aspects of the third dimensional grid begins its dark night of the soul, its catalyst. This is so that they can begin coming online to the fourth dimensional bandwidth that we all felt most potently in December of 2020. So for my new viewers and subscribers, first, welcome, and thank you for strengthening the resonance. I am so happy to have you here. And for my longtime subscribers and deep seekers, let's just get a little recap of the amazing expansion work that we have been moving through over the last 14 months, because I really think that it will help us further understand where we're at now in this story of expansion in our hero's journey. I'm going to start by giving you the briefest description on tethering, which is the perspective from which all of my galactic energy reports are derived from. And for those of you who are not familiar with tethering, I would refer you back to my original channeling, although you'll have to forgive the production value, and at some point I will be endeavoring to update it. However, the information still holds true. I would also suggest that you could go to my main page where you will see a playlist of, it's entitled Channeled Messages and Energy Reports, and another called Tethers of Reality Channeled Work. I keep all of my playlists updated to reflect the last report first and so on. So you can go back to whatever point you would like to over the last 14 months and catch up as to the progression of our human consciousness. Or you can go to the Tethers of Reality playlist to glean further in-depth perspective on tethering. But essentially, to give you the most basic nuts and bolts of it, I channel a fifth dimensional social memory complex of humans called the Terra Group. They are holding the fifth dimensional grid of consciousness for planet Earth. They are the new Earth that everyone is talking about. The Earth is a fifth dimensional planet which holds consciousness for many different aspects of her creation, whether that be an insect, a rock, mineral, a squirrel, all holding different levels of perception and consciousness, all growing and expanding. And up until now, the human race was holding a dominant resonant frequency of a 3D reality or a third density reality. Now, of course, there were humans prior to this holding a dominant resonant frequency of a fourth dimensional template or even a fifth dimensional template. And we've seen many ascended masters come to the earth with, a fifth dimensional template because this is a fifth dimensional planet. Because a density is just a point of perspective. It's the rate of your vibration and frequency. But the collective consciousness at large was holding a third density vibration until 14 months ago. On 12/21 of 2020, the bandwidth of energy opened into the fourth density. Now, what does this mean? So if you look at this image, which is the first image given to me by the Terra Group, you can see the human's energetic blueprint. This is the part of our bodies that we do not see with the naked eye. Now, obviously, the higher we begin to vibrate, the easier it is to see someone's aura and sense their energy template. But in general, up until this point in time, this wasn't something that we would naturally see when we look at a physical body of a human. It's the aspect of the human that's really never been discussed in mainstream society up until now. And that's very indicative of a 3D reality, which is solely based on the material world. But in this image, we can see the total body. You can see here the chakras or energy centers or energy meridians, whatever you call it personally. And I've only depicted the base chakras. There's many energy meridians, and all of these energy centers are swirling around us, creating a vortex of energy or a torrid of energy, which creates a toroidal field. Now, this toroidal field is exactly the same for the planet Earth. And just recently, it's been discovered, or it's being talked about, which I've been saying for the last year and a half, that it's believed that not just our human body, not just our Earth, but the entire universe is one giant torrid. It's just, a nesting doll of torids, all running within one another. Now, these energy centers are running on a bandwidth of energy. And if we trace that energy back to its source, it's coming from the different planetary bodies in our universe. Each one of those planetary bodies also holds a grid of consciousness or a collective consciousness, and it is devoted to different aspects of our human journey or the environment and the archetypal energy that we take on in this experience school called life here on planet Earth. We can also see here that all of the energies are running through the sun, which is our collective future. It is where the future energy resides, and that sun is then corded into the many different higher aspects of our giant star systems and the grand central sun, and then on to Sagittarius A. But those are all future energies, higher dimensional energies. And the moon is what we are known as our collective past. It is the past energies. It's the denser energies. And we'll talk more about the moon's energies later on. But all of these energies in total make up our energetic blueprint. And this blueprint is what holds the keys to the lessons we have contracted or taken on to experience for our evolution here on Earth. So while you may have been holding a higher frequency prior to 12/21 of 2020 in your personal blueprint, in your personal energy vortex, in your personal cords and tethers, the Earth grid, the Earth's collective grid, was vibrating in the third density. And you can see on this other image that I'm showing here that the Earth has a third, a fourth, and a fifth density grid, and we've always had access to these. But up until now, the third density grid was the predominant grid, and that was the case until 12/21 of 2020, in which case the fourth dimensional bandwidth or the fourth dimensional grid made its way onto the collective scene, as it were. So it opened up to the 4D on a collective level. And actually, this process started in 2012, and it's taken that long for the collective to kind of catch up. But we can look at it as an energy gateway that ran from 12/21 of 2012 to 12/21 of 21. And you can see here when I put it up on the screen how that runs concurrently. And there's a lot of speculation as to when it happened. If it did happen in 2012, and even if it happened at all. But from my understanding and many others from my channelings, what's known as the harvest or the age of Aquarius is underway. That began in 2012 and it came online in 2020, and then it essentially closed out or solidified on 12/21 of 21. So what this meant is that the collective frequency, meaning more than 50% of the collective dominant resonant frequency, which is different than a 1-to-1 population total. Okay, this is about energy. And because the faster we vibrate, the more magnetic we become, the more powerful we become. I think at one point the Tarot group explained that this was a 7-to-1 difference, but you'd have to go back and look at my previous channelings. I can't recall off the top of my head. But ultimately, it meant that more than 50% of the collective frequency was vibrating at a fourth density or higher in their personal energy blueprints. So what does this mean? I'm going to be putting out an in-depth description of the difference between densities, but essentially a density is a point of perception. It is the way in which our consciousness perceives reality. Okay, so you do not perceive reality the same way a bird perceives reality, or a rabbit perceives reality, or a crystal perceives reality. or the soil. It's a point of perspective. That is what makes up the frequency of a density. And in the 3D reality, it is perceived as good and bad, right and wrong. It is dualistic in nature and it is material in nature. We are told that reality is created for us, and we must fall into that reality and create it with action. It is outside in, and it's only action that's discussed. There's no discussion of our internal thoughts, our feelings, and ideas creating the physical world around us. It is outside in, not inside out. There is spirituality, but it is also seen as a force that's outside of us, and we must again fall in line with its rules and regulations. It's dogmatic in nature. We are heavily identified with our roles in a third dimensional reality. They are us, and they are what give this life meaning, i.e., I am my job title, I am my bank account, I am the car I drive, I am the house that I own, I am my physical body and its appearance. It's total identification with the self as being who we are. Okay, those are all the hallmarks of a 3D reality that we are moving out of, because in a fourth density experience, although it is still dualistic in nature, okay, there is still polarity. Polarity does not phase out until we reach a fifth density consciousness, in which we can see from the vantage point that everything is neutral. Okay, now that doesn't mean that you can't hold a fifth density consciousness, because this planet here is a fifth density planet, as we've discussed, and that grid is available to us. What it means is that in the fourth density that we're moving into, that the collective is moving into, it is still going to be a density of polarity. It's just that the context or the flavor of that polarity shifts. Okay. So it's now in the 4D a recognition that we are more than this physical reality. It's what most of us know as an awakening. It is the unconscious becoming conscious, and it is known as the magical bridge density. So now we can begin to see the correlation here between what my team in spirit is calling this energy gateway as the rainbow bridge to what the 4D is known as the magical bridge. It is the opening here in the material realm. For you are actually that magical bridge. It is your consciousness. You are the rainbow bridge. In the fourth dimensional consciousness, however, as I've stated, there is still duality, and thus the transformed consciousness still needs a catalyst. Okay, so like I said, the flavor changes. This catalyst changes from good and bad in thought and deed to awake and asleep. In a 4D consciousness, we begin to see things like virtue signaling, judging others based on their level of awareness. We feel a desire to extend our newly found awareness onto others. You will see here others feel the need to wake others up. And we've seen this quite a bit in this discussion of like the wolf and the sheep, in discussions of those being unawakened as sheep. Okay, so there still is separation, there still is judgment, there still is polarity, and there still is duality. However, now that polarity becomes about consciousness. It's understanding that reality is created from the inside out, that our thoughts, opinions, ideas, beliefs, that is what's creating the physical world around us. But the discussion then begins to tailor around other people's state of awareness. So we still have not reached that point of unity, of oneness, of neutrality, of the ability to see all things without judgment. That's indicative of a 5D consciousness. Our collective is now moving into a 4D consciousness. And if you look at the events that have transpired since 2020 with the pandemic, you can see this fourth density consciousness arising in the collective, because that's the point of perception that it's been about. That is the narrative and the flavor of this. It's, others are asleep, others are awake. The various different social bubbles that and echo chambers that people have placed themselves in order to insulate themselves from other people's points of view, still viewing the self as separateness, but now judging other people's thought process, their consciousness. This is indicative of a fourth density consciousness. Now, after this state of awareness has been surpassed, we begin to understand, just as we did previously in the fourth density consciousness, or in the third density consciousness, that we are not the car, the home, the money, that we cannot wake up others or impact them by demonstrating their separateness, which is indeed our separateness when we differentiate, when we judge, when we label an experience as awake or asleep, conscious or unconscious. We may be able to discern that others are acting from their programs, from the automaton, but we surpass the desire to change that, only detaching from our identity to that. But this is the practice of a fifth dimensional consciousness. And I understand that many of the people I'm exchanging energy here have begun moving into more of a fifth dimensional consciousness, not in total, not in full, okay, because we are the sum total of our entire energy blueprint, and we may be able to have fifth dimensional consciousness in one area of our life, but in another area of our life, we're still in fourth density consciousness. But right now we are talking about the collective state and the collective consciousness as a whole, and it is just opening its eyes to the fourth density. And the other thing I think it's important to understand, that if you are holding a higher density than the collective, that is for reason, that is for purpose. Most of you here are grid keepers, wanderers, way showers, light workers. You came here with, a sixth density consciousness and above to hold the light, to hold the grid, to magnetize others into the consciousness that we're creating right now. There has to be a first. And right now we are the first souls. We're the first energy signatures creating this fourth density grid on behalf of the collective so that they have a path to follow. So I hope that gives you a little bit more clarity and understanding of the difference between the third density and the fourth density, and even a little bit of the fifth density. And in this other video I will do, I'm going to go in depth into it. But I think there's a lot of talk about 5D, the 5D Earth, the new Earth, as a fifth dimensional consciousness, and it is. But we can't skip over the fourth density entirely. I mean, a tree doesn't become a full embodiment of itself from the acorn overnight. It's an expansion, it's a process, it's a ring, it's a spiral. And we are spiraling ever more outward and beyond. And we are moving from the third to the fourth. We're not just going to jump from the third to the fifth, as much as many, people in the spiritual community would love that, for the total. And it doesn't mean that you cannot create a fifth dimensional reality for yourself, okay? Because again, it's just a point of perspective. But you need to understand that the world you're moving through holds many different densities and perspectives. And the collective as a whole is just now moving into the 4D. So in other discussions, I explained that the moon is holding the grid to the past. So both the collective and the individual past was the lower density tethers, or the lower frequencies that run through the Earth's grid and our personal energy vortex. It holds us in the material, essentially. It is what grounds us to this dimensional plane of existence. And there is an organic moon and an inorganic moon overlay. Okay, so this inorganic moon overlay is in essence what had been tampered with in the third dimensional grid. This was known as the lack matrix or the inversion matrix. Rudolf Steiner and Madame Blavatsky discussed this as the eighth sphere. So it doesn't matter what you would like to call it, but it held the moon's energy in a constant state of the past. It is the dense thoughts and creations of the collective consciousness, because we understand that all thoughts create a reality somewhere. They needed to go somewhere. So the dense imagination of the 3D went through this organic and inorganic matrix of energy. Essentially, when the moon was created, it was the organic moon, it was supposed to act as a filtration system. It was like the lymphatic system in our body. So whenever we had our catalyst moments, our dense moments, whenever we had divergent thoughts or divergent timelines began to appear, that would filter through the moon and then up through the higher energy centers and up and out to be transmuted into the vortex of energy and filtered right back around again. But in the third dimensional timeline that had been divergent in nature, it created this lack matrix or this eighth sphere energy. And what it did was it held us in a state of the past where the human was constantly ruminating about the past, recreating the past. And that held us in this loop of energy that was constantly recycling through us, because so much of our energy vortex in the third and fourth dimension is influenced by the moon. But what happened when the fourth dimensional bandwidth came online is it began a series of events of a homogenization, is what my team in spirit is calling it, of this lack matrix, this inversion matrix. And it began to filter out, clear these lower density timelines, these lower density cords and tethers known as the lack matrix, and gave us the ability to now break free from that into the fourth dimensional grid of what's known as what my team calls the abundance matrix. So no longer would we pass through the bardos entangled, corded into the moon's energy, which is what kept us grounded essentially into the recycling process of reincarnation. It was the idea of karma, the idea of entanglement, which held us into this lack matrix. However, this construct is no longer useful or necessary. It really never was. In the fourth dimensional reality, it is now being phased out of our consciousness. It is being cleared. We understand that we are not quantumly entangled to it anymore. We are freeing ourselves through the process of tethering, through transmuting lower vibrational cords and tethers, denser energy tethers, from the idea of needing to go another round. Okay, everything is being brought into a state of balance. And as we discussed in our last channeling, this is the year of balance, when the inversion matrix or the lack matrix was brought into a homogeneous timeline with the now moment. We were no longer identifying. We no longer needed to identify with divergent timelines, with denser timelines. This was the previous energy gateway that we just moved out of. Okay, so remember that was 12/22 of 21. That was when all of these lower density timelines were all brought into a state of balance. So as these lower density timelines are being cleared and brought to the surface, Okay, the Terra group calls this a homogenization. It is not that polarity will cease or that dense energies will cease. It is in the awareness of this lack matrix that it will be brought into the light of awareness. And once it's drug out into the sun, it can begin to transmute and change. What once was hidden will now be made clear. And this is all about what the violet flame of transmutation is doing. This is what is happening in this now moment, in this energy gateway, bringing the vertical line into harmony with the horizontal line. So now, understanding all of this, if we break it all down into the simplest terms, between 1221 of 2012 and 1221 of 2021, we moved from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. This is when the harvest began. This is when the fourth density grid's bandwidth opened up into the collective, and the what's known as the harvest, or the homogenization, or the move into the abundance matrix, began. Okay, it's when it came online into the energy bandwidth of the human and of the collective. And it's when the collective energy began moving towards this spiral into the golden age, what's known as the golden age. On 12/22 of 2021, the denser timelines and energies, also known as the lack matrix or the eighth sphere, the divergent timelines, were brought into a state of balance. They all became one timeline, and that is through our awareness of that. That was all brought together into one homogeneous, and it's still ongoing. And the inversion matrix essentially was brought into a state of balance through our light of awareness. During that time frame, we also began creating the abundance matrix in the material realm. That reached a creation point on 11/11 of 2021. We have just moved out of this balancing energy into this, from this state of limbo, from the liminal space, into what's now the next gateway of energy, which is the 2/2/22 to the 2/22/22 energy gateway, known as the Rainbow Bridge, where the violet flame of transmutation is pouring forth onto the collective grid. This is an energy of purification. It's an energy of transmutation. And it's taking all of these remnant third density thoughts, ideas, beliefs, divergent timelines, denser energies, however you want to look at it, all the remnants of the lack matrix. And it's bringing that into a state of balance. It's clearing karma or quantum entanglement or the idea of it by our state of awareness. And it's creating the bridge, the rainbow bridge, which is the bridge between heaven and earth onto the material plane, the horizontal plane of the earth's atmosphere. And this is what this energy gateway is all about. It's about bringing it all back to a state of balance. So now let's get into the Rainbow Bridge in depth. In Nordic mythology, the Bifrost is the mythical rainbow bridge that connects the world of men on Earth with the realm of the gods in Asgard. The bridge is described as the main way the earth is connected with Asgard and is used for transport of not only gods, but also souls of men who have proved worthy during their life to accompany Odin and other Nordic gods in the final end times. So now, with the understanding that the fourth density is known as the Rainbow Bridge, that our energy blueprints are connected all the way to the gateway of intelligent infinity via the grand central sun and the black hole Sagittarius A, through our pillar of light and all of the energy centers embodying the 7 rays, we can see the correlation between the rainbow bridge and this energy gateway, allowing the violet ray to purify our remaining energy tethers in the 3rd density to the 4th density or the rainbow bridge. What's even more astonishing when I researched the term the tarot group had given me is that the Bifrost's bridge is very closely connected to the myth of the apocalyptic event of Ragnarök. So for Vikings, the myth of Ragnarök was a prophecy of what was to come at some unspecified and unknown time in the future. But it had profound ramifications for how the Vikings understood the world in their own time. And in it, it describes a series of future events and battles which culminate in the destruction of the world, only for it to be born again, a new earth rising. Ragnarök means fate of the gods or twilight of the gods. It is also referred to as the fate of mankind. The start of Ragnarök will be marked with several specific events. The disappearance of the sun and moon, or in some translations, it is the darkening of the sun, and the sounding of the horn alarm by Heimdall, who guards the Rainbow Bridge. Now, as we have already discussed, this is the end of the inorganic moon's controlling frequency as we now enter the 4th density and homogenized timelines. So yes, the inorganic moon will disappear. The sun darkening could be reflective of the partial solar eclipse occurring on April 30th, or when I looked into it, unbelievably, there is an asteroid called VF22, which is passing by the Earth on 2/22/22, which is the closest it's been in 100 years. And I understand from the tarot group that we have averted any true apocalyptic timelines where possibly this asteroid could have hit. Another interpretation of the sun and moon is the female and male aspects of our human design. In Nordic mythology, the sun and moon were the female and male aspects. So as we carry both divine masculine and divine feminine energy within us. In this tale, in this story, they are forever chased through the sky by the wolves Skull, who means one who mocks, and Hades, one who hates. And during Ragnarök, they are finally caught. Again, this is a wonderful way for us to look at the integration and the balancing that is occurring during this energy gateway as we homogenize these timelines and clear our karmic templates. No longer running from the dense and dark shadows that chase us, but instead allowing ourselves to be caught so that we may alchemize these dense energies and once and for all transcend our lower natures, healing the past which mocks us with our attention on it and forgiving our hatred of self and others, allowing our shadow contracts to be dissolved. These events leave nothing but a black void in the heavens, And we can view this void as the 0 point of creation, where all of our power comes from, and the birthing of the 4th density. But we'll discuss this more in detail at the end of the story. But that's what happens. So the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky, they're all darkened, and what's left is this black void. In any case, it also states that leading up to the event, there shall be a great winter that lasts as long as 3 winters with no normal summers in between. So if we look at the pandemic, we can also make the correlation that we are now experiencing the 3rd and final winter of this pandemic. And indeed, there has been nothing normal about the summers in between. In this tale, it is said that mankind will become so desperate during this time that laws and morals will fade away, leaving only the bare struggle for survival. Again, it's easy to see from a narrative perspective how the mandates and lockdowns and what's happened with all of the government overreach it has drawn this parallel. It even discussed how brother will turn against brother, and indeed the rift that's been created between families over perceived disagreement on vaccination has, in so many cases, caused families to become divided. In the final event leading up to Ragnarök is the sounding of the horn by Heimdall, the divine sentry, who is the ever vigilant guard of the Rainbow Bridge. It is said that he requires less sleep than a bird. His eyesight is so keen that he can see for hundreds of miles by day or night, and his hearing is so acute that he can hear grass growing on the ground and wool growing on sheep. Heimdall was once known as the father of all mankind. When he blows this Jalar horn or resounding horn, it will be heard throughout all of the cosmos. So we can see here the correlation between Heimdall and the source of intelligent infinity, or the gateway to intelligent infinity, and his blowing of the horn as the 0 point of our graduation into the next density. Here we can also see the parallels between what's known as Gabriel's trumpet. And although there is no actual biblical source that Gabriel himself blows the trumpet, it has much cultural significance in not only Christianity, but many other religions discuss the blowing of the trumpet to signify what's known as the rapture. And what comes next is very akin to the rapture stories. So essentially, all of the beasts and baddies come out to play, or we can see this as the shadow rising into the light of awareness. All of the denser energies that have held grudges with the gods now have their chance to take them out. And the gods are aware that they will not survive, but they fight until their deaths, until ultimately the earth sinks into the sea. This is where our timeline and our coming shift, we can see the violet ray of transformation and transmutation, transmuting the lack matrix, the third density cords and tethers, the karmic templates as we give birth to the abundance matrix. So in Ragnarök, the matrix of good and evil falls away, and the earth sinks into the sea, and nothing is left but the void of creation. The void of creation. How amazing is that? The void of creation is our move into the fourth density. The lack matrix gone forever. Our karmic templates cleared. Our old outdated programs and beliefs dismantled. And now a 0 point where we can enter a whole new paradigm, a new construct known as the fourth density abundance matrix, or as we discussed, the 4D, the magical bridge density. In Ragnarök, when then from this void of creation, a new world arises, a green and beautiful world, and all live joyously in this lush land. And there's a surviving man and woman who repopulate this new earth. A new sun is born, which is a daughter of the previous sun. Again, we can see this as a whole new future if we look at it from the context of the sun and tethering, or we can see that as the rising of the divine feminine in the age of Aquarius, the golden age. And here is where we find ourselves in this rebirthing, the violet flame of transmutation working its way across the planet as the shadow elements of the dense and wounded lack matrix are now rising. So let's now discuss the violet flame. Obviously, we understand that the violet ray is associated with the higher energy centers of the third eye, and most importantly, the crown chakra, as it opens the gateway to all of the higher energy centers, which gives us access to other dimensions. It is also where we receive our guidance and our direct source of energy from higher dimensions. And And not only our sun, but the grand central sun. It is our tap, our fount. And therefore, the violet flame is also associated with higher frequencies. This sacred fire is often depicted as the violet flame of transmutation, and it can also be seen as the phoenix rising from the ashes, which again, we can also take that same idea and apply that to the mythology that we just discussed of Ragnarök, this phoenix rising from the ashes, this birthing of a new dimension. It is also associated with Saint Germain and the angel Zadkiel. The violet flame of transmutation is a fire of purification. It clears karma and neutralizes dense energy. It is a higher frequency of energy that you can bring in to change yourself and the world around you. And as I'm recording this, I have received confirmation that a solar storm did, in fact, hit the Earth's atmosphere on 2/2/22, which was the beginning of this energy gateway. So for me, this was confirmation of what I've been channeling, that this violet flame was indeed pouring forth with the fire of transmutation, sealing the Earth's grid and its purification energy and frequency. And from what I have channeled, it is clearing bloodlines and DNA back 7 generations. So this is a huge recalibration. And as we've stated, this is the purging of the shadow matrix, and we are now going to be seeing these shadows arise, just like in Ragnarök, and be brought to the surface for this violet flame to then transmute into a higher frequency. The violet flame is also known to accelerate a spiritual awakening, so you may be feeling your gifts amplify. And in earlier channelings, I discussed that this was not just the move into the fourth density, the balance of the vertical line of the etheric and the horizontal line of the material, and the homogenization of timelines and matrices. But this also is the true mass awakening on the planet. And this violet flame is going to assist those just waking up to come out of their dark night of the soul, which they've been experiencing since the last energy gateway. So the other thing I found interesting was that the beginning of this energy gateway was February 2nd, and that was also Groundhog's Day. And culturally here, Groundhog's Day has to do with, if the groundhog sees a shadow and what would the length of winter be, etc. But the whole idea of the shadow and a longer winter or an earlier spring and the energy centers that we, are moving through with this gateway, there's just so much symbology. It's almost like you can't miss it. So what do you feel with this violet ray of transformation, of transmutation? So you may have been feeling during this time period like you have a fever, like inside, even though you're cool to the touch. You may have been experiencing burning in the bottoms of your feet or in the energy centers in your hands. You may be seeing visions of violet flame angels or just seeing more of the color violet around you. I know that I received a vision of this violet flame angel during meditation, and it was very intense and pretty powerful. You may have been feeling the need to completely change your eating habits. You may have been feeling that your third eye has been activated more heavily, because remember, this is also associated with like spiritual acceleration. You may be feeling that you need to leave relationships behind or jobs, or feeling like you just can't continue on with your typical practices or schedules. Like a lot of upheaval, during this time as well. And a lot of like experimentation. So, working through unnamed blocks. So how can we work with this violet flame? I've been doing a daily meditation that I'm going to continue the practice for 30 days. And I know that I refer to him a lot, but Steve Noble has some really awesome violet flame, specifically violet flame meditations, guided meditations that you can work with. And I also thought that with the passing of Dr. Hugh Len, who was the kind of the father of this self-identity Ho'oponopono. And if you haven't looked into him, I would. But Ho'oponopono is definitely another very powerful practice which you could use in conjunction with this violet flame energy, because it carries a very strong energy template. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't discuss the amazing astrological energies that are occurring alongside of this energy gateway in this grand symphony. And now that you have a better understanding of tethering and the fact that these planets are actually consciousness that we are tapped into, tethered into, and that they are in constant communication with us, they are always working harmoniously in order to move us to the next stage and phase in our evolution and our cycles and our blueprints. So the first of this is that we experienced the Venus retrograde and the Mercury retrograde, and the full Mercury retrograding energies completed. However, we are still in the shadow period until the 23rd. And as I've discussed previously, Mercury is this messenger of the gods. It is, this higher kind of angelic consciousness. And when it's in this retrograding energy, it slows down in its energy vortex. We perceive that as moving backwards, but it's just a slowing down of its vibration in order for us to recalibrate and refine. And this violet flame is kind of amping that up so that we can receive communication and messages from these angelic beings. Next, we have Venus and Mars that are conjunct and will be for a longer period than usual. Okay, so that began on the full moon on the 16th. And that lasts all the way until the end of March. So these are the rulers of the nodes of fate, and they are working together in order to balance one another out. So Venus, which can be seen as the grid of higher love and beauty, of higher dimensional consciousness, of the exalted earth, and, of this higher dimensional energy template. And then you have Mars, which is the workhorse, symbolizing our drive, our ambition, our passion, our energy. So again, we can see these grids of consciousness working together to balance the masculine and feminine energies and the material and the etheric. So the story of the Rainbow Bridge, the violet flame, the myth of Ragnarök, it's all working together in conjunction with the Venus and Mars conjunction, with Mercury coming out of its retrograde. And then kind of the cherry on top to all of this is, and it's just completely amazing, is the Pluto return. So, Pluto being the planet of power and transformation and renewal, it's actually returning on the 22nd. And it takes between 225 to 247 years for Pluto to transit around the sun. So we have not seen these energies in North America since 1776. And in 1776 is when our Declaration of Independence was signed. So this is a highly transformative time. In conjunction with the violet flame of transmutation, it's heavily indicative of the ending of this karmic cycle and the beginning of another. It's the death of the old traditions and beginnings of something new. It's the birth into the fourth density. So, it is also known to annihilate problematic dogma that has become part of your DNA. And as we know, this rainbow bridge is, encoded in our energy centers, which is part of our 12-strand DNA. And as the channeling I've received, that this is going to clear us back 7 generations. So this is freedom from the lack matrix. This is moving into the 4th density, and it is spelled out in our celestial bodies. It's written in the stars. So I hope this all gave you this amazing, awesome picture of how all of the energies are working together in this grand symphony for our highest and best timelines. And I also just put together a channeling of Pluto, and this amazing, powerful message, this poetry production, which will allow you to cut cords and tethers, to step into your power. And I really hope that you come away with this, with a feeling of hope and a better and brighter future, and knowing that everything is working to our advantage, everything is working for our expansion, and you are going to see these shadows rise, and you're witnessing this globally. There's many things that are cropping up to the surface, and it's like I said in that channeling of the year 2022, this was expected. This is expected. The collective is going through its dark night of the soul. There's, transformation, transmutation. There's clearing of the whole lack matrix that's, coming up. So just like in the myth of Ragnarök, all the dense energies and the baddies and the shadow elements, they're all going to rise to the surface. But in the end, we are going to experience this amazing, awesome, powerful rebirth. I'm sending you guys all big, 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 big love. Bye.
Just wanted to say I love ya. Scully loves ya. Bye.